Thank you for coming to the presentation by our guest, Mr. Ahmed Diraige, and the title of his presentation, as you know, is The Continuing Crisis in Darfur. I'm Daniel Rothbard. I am the co-chair of the Sudan Task Group, a peace initiative for the crisis in Darfur. And this is really a pleasure in many ways, not the least of which is that this is part of a week-long series of activities in which Mr. Diraige is here assisting us as a senior advisor to our group and giving counsel to different organizations around Washington. And just by way of introduction, I was trying to capture who Mr. Diraige is in brief, and of course this is impossible. But one thing that's obvious is that he is a gentleman of power, of different faces of power. He has extensive experience in institutional power. He has had important positions in the government of Sudan. He was a minister of labor and cooperatives. He was governor of Darfur. He was in various other positions. He is currently the founder and chair of the Sudan Federal Democratic Alliance. These are positions of enormous power. And under that power is a vision which I think is a vision of humanitarian need that we in conflict analysis and resolution are very familiar with, intersects quite clearly with our commitment for positive peace and justice. He has worked actively for a very long time for humanitarian relief. He started the Darfur Development Fund, or Darfur Development, I think, Foundation. Front, thank you. Thank you, Hardy. Darfur Development Foundation in 1964. Certainly recognizing the critical humanitarian needs of people in his country. And he has a tireless champion of the people with the least power. And you know, many wise thinkers have said that the true judge of someone's character is the sacrifice to the least powerful members of society. And that, I think, speaks very well of our guest. And I first met Mr. Diraige in London in 2006. At a consultation, we were talking about the future of Sudan, and many of the participants basically had their special particular needs that they were advocating, each of which sounded compelling. But Mr. Diraige, I was particularly struck by his imploring the members to rise above any particular narrowly defined need and focus on the general humanitarian needs of the least powerful. And part of this power, as I've been listening to him over the week, part of this power, I think, comes from insight into who the Darfurians are. This is a gift which is extremely rare among the peace advocates, peace activists. Who are they? What is, as it were, their soul? And this comes, of course, from his early years as inheriting the position as a tribal chief, one of the tribal chiefs in Darfur, and his continued compassion and empathy and deep sense of understanding of who Darfurians are. And this, as I say, should launch him, in my opinion, places him at one of the highest levels of not only the peace initiative in Darfur, but the future of a new Sudan, where it can possibly aspire to the highest levels of society. So it is a great pleasure to be with him during the week and, of course, after this week. So please join me in welcoming our guest, Mr. Ahmed Diraige.
Thank you, Professor. I've been humbled by all the things you attributed to me, and I hope I will be up to the standard of trying to give my audience a real vision and view into the problems of Darfur as I see them. As you rightly said, that one of, I don't know if it's called disadvantage or advantage, is that I grew up with the problems in the Sudan because I was made a tribal chief when my father died, and as the oldest son, my tribe chose me, and at the time I was about 3,000 kilometers in the White Nile doing my intermediate education during the British rule, and the British government, or the representatives of the British government, met with our sub-chiefs, and they said, well, now the chief has died, and of course life continues, we must get somebody to take over. And they said, well, according to our customs and traditions, it is a hereditary post, and therefore the oldest son is the one. And I was the oldest son at 11. So while I was at school, not even conscious of what happened to my father and what happened down there, I was selected to become a tribal chief. The governor of Darfur at the time was British, and the district commissioner of the area where I come from was British, and he was a man with great experience. He was a soldier. He fought the two world wars, the first and the second, and then joined the British administration in the Sudan, and he was a district commissioner of Zalingi. While he was there, then the Second World War erupted again, so he was recalled and went back to fight in the Second World War. Strangely enough, later on, I think around 1970, I happened to come to the United Arab Emirates as a member of the Constitutional Committee, which created the United Arab Emirates. It was at the time called Trucial States, because each emirate, Dubai, Abu Dhabi, Sharjah, Ajman, Ras Al Khaimah, Fujairah, were independent, and they were protectorates under the British rule. The British were leaving, and they wanted to bring all these emirates together, including Qatar, where Doha is now. So they wanted to bring them together into a federal union. And at the time, I was a member of Sudanese parliament, and we were making a constitution for the Sudan. And I was a leader of opposition in the Sudanese parliament. It's something which I mentioned now, you didn't mention. I was also leader of opposition in the Sudanese parliament. So when President Nimeri took power and dissolved our parliament, I was not doing anything. So the British asked me if I could make use of my experience to go to the Emirates as a member of the Constitutional Committee, using my expertise as somebody who was a member of parliament and making the constitution for the Sudan. And I accepted that post, and I went there, and I participated with others into creating the United Arab Emirates. It was a good experience, of course, which gave me a lot of education, having an experience in another country. Now, as I said, I grew with the problems of Darfur because I was, 11 years when I became chief. I was born in a village. My father was a chief then. But a chief's son does not necessarily mean that he is somebody that one will envisage is living a luxurious life. I was just living a simple life in the village. I worked as a shepherd boy going with the cows, and with the goats, to guard them from wild animals and to find grazing for them. And this was just which every young man in the village did, and I did that. I lived in my family and in Darfur. Both men and women worked very hard, either as farmers, traditional farmers, or looking after their herds. And my mother was one of them. She had her own farm. She used to grow sorghum. She used to grow onions. She used to grow everything that were needed by a household. So I knew how the ordinary person in Darfur lived from my own childhood and my own experience, from which then I developed that impetus and the desire that I was privileged, in spite of my humble background in the village, that I managed to find my way into education up to the University of Khartoum level. And in my time, strangely enough, in the University of Khartoum, there were only 5 people from Darfur. Only 5. In the whole university, it was over 3,000 or 5,000 people. We were only 5. So I was privileged to be there as one of the privileged rural people to come to a university level. When I finished that, I worked as a civil servant, which also gave me another experience. And then my boss, who was a Dutchman, he trained me and then decided that I should go abroad and study further and specialize in economics. So he sent me to the United Kingdom in 1959. And then I went to the university in Leicester and did another degree in economics, and then specialized in applied economics, or econometrics as they call it. I came back to Sudan as a director of statistics and at the same time as advisor in the Ministry of Planning and Development. We made the first 10-year economic development plan of the Sudan. Then we had a military regime of General Aboud, and there was an upheaval in the Sudan against the military regime, and it succeeded. General Aboud resigned, and democratic life came back. So the people in Darfur asked me that, look, you are an educated person and you are one of us. We want you to stand for elections, the member of parliament. And I said, well, what is the guarantee? They said, well, look, you stay here and we will bring you. And actually they managed to elect me to the Sudanese parliament in 1965 as an independent candidate. Now, I went as an independent candidate because I was there when Sudan became independent in 1965, 50, 56, and 60. And I have seen the structure of Sudanese politics, that our democratic system was not much different from the military regime because it was based on religious sectarianism. We had 2 main parties, and they derived their power from the religious leadership of the Sudanese religious sects. And the hierarchy in the party was dependent on the families that were a religious head. And I was saying that this is not the right way of doing democracy because, again, there's dictatorship. People are not practicing their democratic right through the normal way as it should be, that everybody is free and everybody should know that you elect a government to serve you, not to serve the government. And you elect a leader to serve you, not to be subservient to the leader. But the religious leaders, they were religious leaders and everybody followed that religious sect, and therefore they were obliged to vote for the party whether it did anything for them or it didn't. So I was against that, and I said I am not going to join any political party. I will go as an independent candidate, so I'll be free to say what I want and to serve the people who elect me rather than serving a religious leader, being after I affiliate myself with one of them. So we can say that when I entered the Sudanese politics, I entered with a completely new vision, that I am there to serve the people, not the people to be subservient to me, and also to do something about the people who gave me the honor to go to Parliament, to see to it that they benefit from my presence there in improving their life and livelihood. So that is how I went into Sudanese politics, and that's how I got involved in the welfare of the people rather than on the welfare of myself. Now, in the Sudan, the situation was that we had a government which was over-centralized. Sudan is one of the largest countries in Africa, and it is the biggest in size. The second is Algeria, and the third is Nigeria, and it's the 9th largest country in territory, in area. Sudan, 9th in the whole world. After Brazil, Sudan is in the 9th largest country in size. And having studied political science in the University of Khartoum first, I came to know that usually countries which are large in size, they adopt a system of government which is based on decentralization, because the country is so big that central planning will not work because it's so big. Countries also where there's diversity of culture and ethnicity may necessarily adopt a system of government that will handle such a situation. And Sudan also, being a country which is multi-ethnic and which is multi-religious, you cannot have a centralized government with one vision. And in fact, this is one of the problems we are suffering from today, because in the first place we had our independence, in which the political parties were sectarian, and they divided the Sudan into two. One religious sect, which was the Ummah Party, was controlling the Western Sudan, Kordofan and Darfur, which in population, they have half the population of the Sudan. The other party, which was the National Democratic Party now, it was called the National Unionist Party, had also a religious sect at the head of it, and it was mainly in the northern part of Sudan, bordering Egypt, until the frontiers of Kordofan, the south, and Darfur. So the people generally, when there is a democratic system and there are elections, they are either Ummah Party, because they are religious followers of the Ummah Party, who are called Ansars. Ansars means followers, or National Democratic Party, which is following of the other religious sect. And the level of education not being so great for many MPs to understand that when they go there, they are going to represent the people who elect them. They thought that they are going to represent the leaders of the political parties. The leaders of the political parties also had power because they had money. And therefore, anybody who wanted to be elected has to be financially supported by them and approved by them, so that the people can then use the religious influence with the masses of the people to elect, this is our man. So they came to parliament as the representatives of the religious leaders rather than the representatives of the people who elected them. And then there was jealousies between the two parties, because each religious leader felt that this is my competitor, that religious leader, and therefore I should be the number one. But neither of them got enough majority to rule by himself or through his party. So they were forced to have a coalition government between two parties. Within that two party, they were jealous of each other. They were antagonizing each other. They will form a government of what they may call it national unity or call it any name. But in fact, within that party, they are antagonizing each other. So most of the time they spend it in antagonizing each other, in canceling each other, rather than doing positive things for the people. And then the military, which was the only organized part of the community, will find that I think the people are frustrated and they are fed up with seeing these people whom they elected doing nothing for them. So they make a military coup and take over. And when they take the military coup, they were not prepared to rule a country. They didn't have a clear plan. All they had is brute force and power. So, but they feel that they have to do something. So anything they do is done to please people, whether it is feasible or not. And there's nobody to criticize it. So they opted for what the economists call white elephants, big projects, so that at the anniversary of the revolution, there will be a big fanfare to show the achievement. And the achievement could be a big dam or a big scheme or something that people can see physically what it is. But in fact, it may not be feasible or so. So what happened out of all this, that the people in the peripheries started to feel that they don't see any change, whether it's under the democratic elected government or a military government. So they started, the young elites who got educated, to form their own organizations. And in 1964, I formed an organization called the Darfur Development Front, because we felt that Darfur was neglected since the colonial period. And the reason was simple, that Darfur was the last region in the Sudan to join the Sudan as it is. It was an independent kingdom till 1916. And it was annexed by force by the British to the rest of the Sudan. But because they fought the British, and the British defeated the last Sultan, it was an Anglo-Egyptian government, and therefore they felt that these people in Darfur, they are rebels, and we should treat them as rebels, and we don't want to give them any chance to rise up again. So they never did any project of a development nature in Darfur. They just ruled it with an iron fist, and therefore in Darfur the people lacked services, they lacked development, and many of them had to go to the northern part of Sudan, to central Sudan, where there were development projects, to provide cheap labor, because there were no projects. This, of course, increased the resentment, and in the end, as a result of that, we felt it, and we, the elites of Darfur, created what we call the Darfur Development Front. And this was for all the people in Darfur, irrespective of their political affiliation, irrespective of their ethnic origin or tribal origin, which is today, strangely enough, this government is using ethnicity in a different way, as an instrument of divide or rule, and divide and rule, using this ethnicity itself for the people of Darfur to fight each other, rather than fighting for their rights against the government, because the grievances is with the government, not with each other, because they themselves are all underdeveloped. They are all of them poor. All of them need services, need development, need everything. Whether they are people who are looking after their animals, we are called pastoralists, or whether they are traditional agricultural farmers, because both of them have not been touched by modernity. Those who are farmers, they use the simple implement that the ancestors used to cultivate, which was very hard work. Those who are pastoralists, they are roaming around. Wherever there is grazing for their animals, they go. Wherever there is water, they go. They haven't got the opportunity of educating their children. They haven't got the opportunity of getting medical services, just as much as the farmers living in villages are living. So that's why we started Darfur Development Front for all the people of Darfur, irrespective of their ethnic or tribal or religious origin. It happened that also the people in the rest of the Sudan, in the peripheries, the east, the Bija, and the south, and the Nuba Mountain started movement simultaneously in 1964. The Nuba started the Nuba Solidarity Movement, led by a priest called Philip Rabush. He died about 3 years ago. And the people in the south started a movement called Sudan African National Union by a southerner Dinka, also called William Deng, who died also. And then the Bija started a movement also in the east called the Bija Congress. And all of us, Darfur Development Front, the Bija Congress, and the Nuba, came together and said, well, look, we should consolidate our efforts because our situation is the same. We are all underdeveloped. And then see how we can fight this underdevelopment together rather than each doing it by itself. So we formed an organization called New Forces Congress. And we called ourselves New Forces. This, of course, later on developed when the SPLA started. And they called it the New Sudan. So the idea of New Sudan was there since 1964 as New Forces Congress, bringing all the peripheral people to work together for their welfare vis-a-vis the central government in Khartoum. So that is where the impetus for his demands, which later developed, and because nobody was listening in Khartoum, the political parties were involved in internal wrangling, and the military people, they were ruling by sheer force. They couldn't care about what people thought. So things developed later on that these movements, which were only movements asking for justice and equality, became military. So we had the Sudan Liberation Movement in Darfur, and we have the GEM in Darfur, and I started a movement called Darfur, not Darfur Development Front, but Sudan Federal Democratic Alliance. And I called it Alliance because I wanted to still the alliance we created with the peripheries, which was called New Forces Congress, will continue. Because the more we are together, the better opportunity we have to wrest our rights from the central government. There is a long history about the development of this dissension in the peripheries versus the central government, and it is a situation that exists up to now. So today in Darfur you have some people like myself. I formed my movement, which is Sudan Federal Democratic Alliance, on a clear vision, and it was for the whole Sudan, not for Darfur. If the Sudan as a whole is to remain united, irrespective of the ethnical diversity and religious diversity, first of all, we must accept our reality, that we are multi-ethnic. And the ethnicity is now based on people of Arab origin and of non-Arab origin. They're all Sudanese. And they've been living together since the colonial period. Why don't they live together now? And if there are grievances, they are not caused by either of them. There are grievances coming from the central government, who had the power and who had the ability to be fair and just to everybody in the country. So instead of the people in the peripheries fighting against each other, they should bring all their efforts together to fight against the central government, whatever nature it is, whether it's military or civilian, asking for justice rather than going along. Before, when the political parties themselves were overthrown by the military, and they wanted to gain their power back. And the peripheral people who were complaining from marginalization, they call it, they came together and formed another alliance called the National Democratic Alliance. And this was in Asmara in Eritrea, and the Eritrean government gave us sanctuary. And then when the military government of President Bashir came and he said that, look, I came by political force and military force. Anybody who wants his right has to come and face me militarily. So we decided in the National Democratic Alliance that we also have followers, so we should bring our followers who are able to take arms to counter this government which is taking arms. So we created armed groups, and the SPLA was with us. It was the first and the strongest military faction of the NDA. The political parties and us also, we came together with them and formed this alliance for a new democratic government to be brought about into Sudan. And we called it new in the sense that in the old Sudan, all the political parties, plus anybody who ruled, whether he was military or otherwise, identified the Sudan as an Arab and Islamic state, which was not true, because in the Sudan we had people who were not Arabs, and we had people who were not Muslims. We had Christians, we had Muslims, yes, we had Jews in the Sudan. There is a synagogue still there, and there are people who are animists. They have not entered any of these religions of the book, as they call them, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. And this is the reality. So anybody who tries to, if you call it, socially engineer the people to become one without the other will be really trying an uphill task and cannot unite the country. So our movement was based on the fact that we should respect the religious diversity of the Sudanese people, the ethnic diversity of the Sudanese people, and also share in the political power, because political power was concentrated in the north and center of the Sudan, which was dominated by certain Riverian tribes, and they are the ones who gave the Sudan its identity as Arab Islamic, because they had the privilege of being educated before the others. Therefore, they had the military power, they had the political power, and the political party started there. So whether it was a military government or a democratic elected government, it is the same people. And they put all the development projects in the areas where they come from, and ignore the south, which was not there, ignore the west, which was not there, and ignore the east. That's why we in the south and the west and the east form our own movements in order to get our rights as Sudanese. So what happened later on is that the National Democratic Alliance, which was in Asmara, composed of all the Sudanese, including the SPLA, we made a formula of a new Sudan. What is this new Sudan? And we said the new Sudan is essentially a Sudan in which there is no racial segregation, there is no religious segregation, and there is no ethnic segregation. A Sudan which is federal. There will be a government for all the Sudan, responsible for keeping a united, federal, strong Sudan with some jurisdiction given to it or power, and the power will be the military, because if you want to defend the country, you have to have a military. So we will give the military to the central government, which is the government for all the Sudanese. It is a central government that speaks on behalf of the nation. Today it is in the American government. It is the State Department, which is a foreign office, actually, who talks on behalf of America everywhere, who sends ambassadors. The American states have no power to go and have embassies overseas. So the foreign affairs will be the prerogative of the central government. Also the citizens, whether it's the United States or Sudan, we want them to be the same, that they are Sudanese and these are Americans. So the identity of the individual is based on what country he is citizen of, rather than what ethnicity or religion he belongs to. So again, since this is common to everybody, the right of handling this issue will be given to the central government. For example, the nationality, the American nationality and the American passport. If any American goes abroad, he goes with an American passport, not of a state passport. He's American, and the American embassy or the American government has to protect him as a citizen. Also, for people to feel that they are citizens, they must have one currency to exchange, acceptable to all the states. So we cannot allow each state to have its own currency, then it's not one country. So again, the currency will be given to the central government, and it will be one currency which is valid in all the members of that state. And this is what's happening in the state. And this is what we wanted to happen in the Sudan, and anywhere where there's a government. There are many federal states in the world, and this is the division of power between the central government and the... Then the central government has an overall plan about, which is for the whole country. But that plan, or what should be done, is also divided. So the states have the powers and the means to develop what they can do best. Their education, their health services, their internal roads. They collect the taxes from every resources that are available there in order to plan their educational system, their everything by themselves without the interference of the central government. And if they haven't got enough means to do it, then the central government, which may have more resources, will subsidize those who are not able to do it, so that the citizen in each state will have almost equal opportunity to the other. So this was the plan of our movement, Sudan Federal Democratic Alliance, which later on was adopted by the National Democratic Alliance, all the Sudanese together. And as an opposition, we wanted to discuss with the Sudan government. The Sudan government didn't believe in this. So after international pressures, they said, okay, we will fight first of all with the South, because the South is the one which has military clout, and they are the ones who raise arms first. So they went to Kenya through the mediation of the Americans. It was Senator Darfur who was chosen to mediate in the province of the Sudan. Then they had they started with Machakos in Kenya, and from Machakos they came to Nyabasha, and an agreement was reached between the South Sudan and the Sudanese government in Khartoum, which was called the Comprehensive Peace Agreement. But in fact, there was no Comprehensive Peace Agreement, because comprehensive means all the Sudan. And in this agreement, there were some loopholes, because the issue of identity has not been solved. And then in the agreement of National Democratic Alliance, of Comprehensive Peace Agreement, they said that the South, it was an agreement between South and North. So they identified the North Sudan as Arab Islamic. This, of course, was to appease the Sudanese government, which was ideologically Arab Islamic. And they had to appease the Southerners that, well, you have the right not to apply whatever is applied in the North as Arab Islamic State. You don't apply the Sharia. And in the end, although people prefer that Sudan will be a united country, but the South has an option. If unity is not attractive, they can have plebiscite or have a referendum in the one end and say, well, look, we are different from the North. We are not Arab, we are not Muslims. And the laws which are applied in the North, which are Sharia laws, are not compatible with our way of life, and therefore we want our independence. And they will get our independence. My own vision was that this was tantamount to separating the Sudan into two states. And I am not very optimistic that when the time comes and they think there is elections to be carried out, I think April this year, and one of the voting will be for the Southerners to decide whether they want to be united with their brothers in the North and keep the Sudan as a united country, or they want to separate and have their own country. They will choose, in my view, if the situation continues as it is, the government in the North insisting that Sudan is an Arab Islamic state, and anybody has to comply with this, then the Southerners will say, no, we are not, and they will go. So the South will separate. What will happen in the North itself, God knows, but I think that in the Sudan, in the North itself, we have people who are not Arabs. And we have people who are, all the people in Darfur are Muslims, but there is this coexistence between Arabs and non-Arabs. So again, the problem of identity of Arabs and non-Arabs will be also there in Darfur. So we don't know what will happen about Darfur, what will happen about the Nuba Mountains, what happened in the South itself. In the South, there are people who are Muslims. There are some people who migrated from the North Sudan, who was of Arab origin, and settled in the South. Will they be thrown out to go back to the North, or what will happen? And will most of the Southerners also who came to the North and became citizens, will they be thrown out, not being Arabs, to go there? So I don't know. And I don't think that the problem has been solved through this dichotomy of North Arab Muslim, South non-Arab non-Muslim. But since the issue is Darfur, in Darfur, as I said, we have Arabs and non-Arabs. This is a problem which has to be solved also, because the government has been using this dichotomy for its own interest. The Arabs and the other non-Arabs in Darfur have been living together, even in an independent kingdom before the Sudan was created. Now, the government is for its own end, is using these ethnic differences for its own, is supporting one group against the other. And hence comes this term Janjaweed. And the people who are called Janjaweed are people who are of Arab origin. They are called Janjaweed. They are people who are mainly traditionally nomads, people who move their animals where there's grazing for their animals, where there's water. But another factor came in, that's environmental change, which is almost universal. The North, which was semi-desert, and which the rainfall was less than the rest of the country, but it was sufficient to create enough grazing for the animals that live in that kind of terrain, and enough underground water or water in pools and dry rivers for the animals. Now this is not possible, because the rainfall in the whole Sahel zone, which is the north part of Africa and the west part of Africa, the rainfall has decreased to the extent that some trees have died, grass doesn't grow because there's no water, underground water is depleted, so there is no water. So what happened is the nomads moved from the north to the south, where there is more water, where there's more grazing for their animals. But there they clashed with the people who are traditionally farmers, because the farmers during the rainy season they could produce their crops, and they wouldn't allow the animals to go and eat their crops because this is their livelihood. But the nomads, because their area has been untenable, so they have to come where there is grass. So a conflict arose between the two groups, the nomads and the farmers. The nomads being originally of Arab origin, and the farmers of indigenous African origin. the conflict which was between the farmer and the herd person changed and become an ethnic conflict between Arabs and non-Arabs, which the government has exploited and said, well, according to Islam, all land belongs to God, and anybody can go and occupy any part of land. So this created the problem between the Arabs and non-Arabs. The movements themselves, the military movements in the Sudan, when they started, first of all, they started as young men, militias in villages, protecting their villages against the encroachment of nomads in their villages, and they were farming villages. So many of them didn't have a vision or an ideology, which now they are looking for. What they were doing were protecting their villages, because the nomads used to burn the villages, loot the animals if they find, and then continue to go. So they had to protect their villages from these marauding nomads. But there was no political connotation in it. But now it became political, because the government came in. So, and came in on the side of one group. So the issue now is between the Sudan government and between those young men who started as people guarding their own villages against their own people. It was a kind of a civil war between people of the same country on ethnic grounds. Now it is becoming a war between the government plus the nomads against the sedentary farmers. That's why, and then also many of these movements are supported by certain tribes, because they belong to certain tribes. So again, tribalism played a role in this. That's why for them now, the international community intervened, and the people now want to bring peace. And the peace is essentially between the government and the people who are carrying arms. And strangely enough, the Arab societies also took arms. First of all, they thought that these people who are resisting their encroachment, since they are armed, they have to be armed. And now they have realized that by doing so, the confidence and the coexistence between them and their compatriots who were farmers have been destroyed. And some of them have sobered up, and they feel that the culprit is really the government. Because after all, before they used to be compatible, they used to be complementary. Because the nomads, they don't grow any crops. The farmers grow crops. So after, and the British organized this very well, the British made a norm that from June until January, the herders should never come to the area where there is farming, to avoid conflict. And this was strictly observed through the tribal chiefs and through the central government. So the nomads will stay in the northern part of Darfur. At the time, there was enough grazing for their animals, there was enough water, and they didn't need to come. The farmers, the farming is not enclosed. So they cultivate, and then they are sure that there's no animals to come and eat. The small amount of animals they have in the villages, they used to organize during the rainy season that all the animals of the village will be collected together, and any household who has animals will be responsible for shepherding these animals in order to avoid them going into anybody's farm. So everything was neatly organized, and if any animal goes into a farm of anybody, it's the responsibility of the family which has the duty to see to it that the animals don't go there, and they will pay for it. So everything was neatly organized. It was subsequently, after becoming independent, that things became chaotic, and the nomad can go anywhere and even settle in the middle of the farmers, and this created the problem between them. And the movements, not knowing exactly Why have they taken arms? Now that there's an opportunity for them to come and negotiate a peace process with the government, many of them are bewildered. They don't know what they should ask for. Should they ask the government to stop the nomads coming to this area, or what will they do? Some of them who took arms think that by taking arms, you have to be rewarded by getting a post which you may not be entitled to, or getting financial reward that you don't really deserve. And this is now the problem we are in, because the international community, it has come in and said that, well, look, the problem is that we would like to, first of all, finish the war between the Sudanese and their government. There should be peace. Without peace, there's no development. The government is there. It's known, and it's as a policy. It's Arab Islamic. But those who have carrying arms, they are talking many things. And everybody has his own vision. Some people think it's a problem between the nomads and them, Arabs and non-Arabs. Some people think it's the government. But they have to unify their vision. They failed to do so. That's why there's no way that people can sit on a table like this to discuss a problem when there are 5 points of views there and 1 point of view here. There must be 1 point of view on the opposite side and 1 point of view here. And then with the referee, the international community as a referee, they can see if the demands of one side are reasonable and pressure the other to yield. But without that, they can't do anything. This brings me finally to the role of the Institute, because the Institute for Conflict Analysis and Resolution was the first movement, because we had many conferences sponsored by many people. But they were analyzing if you like to call it, the dimensions of the problem, and then trying also to find a solution. But nobody has done a serious effort except your institute to bring the stakeholders together and to tell them the real dimensions of the problems in Darfur, the ethnic, the religious, the conflict between farmers and nomads, the environment and everything, and what are the solutions. And we had this conference in Siena, in which the Institute was there, and the Italian University in Siena. And many of the stakeholders in Darfur came, and they were, if you like to call, convinced by the people who were there, your institute here, and Siena, that, look, the problem, these are the dimensions of the problems, and you should all rally around these issues, and then form a common negotiating team, and go and sit with the government and discuss it, under the auspices of whoever is the mediator, if it is in Doha, if it's anywhere, because without this, any initiative will fail. Because the people who meet to discuss, what are they discussing? The government knows itself, but all the others must know what do they want, and they must agree on it, not to come with different points of views over the same issue. And we agreed that in Siena, that yes, they invited all the stakeholders, including the movements. The movements sent representatives, union representatives. And the union representatives who were there were convinced that these are the dimensions and this is what should be done. But we all agreed that as long as the main movements are not there, we are not sure that whatever agreement we make will be accepted, because they have weapons, they can sabotage it. So let us say this is enough. Let us prepare another meeting and let these people who came representing their movements, having been convinced themselves with these dimensions of the problem, go back and have their own meeting and say, well, look, this is what we went, and this is what we agreed on, and here it is, you have a look. If you agree with it, then there is a consensus around which people can meet. If you disagree, come to the next meeting and raise your issues. And people will either convince you that they were right and then there's a consensus, or you convince them that they were wrong and will accept your proposal and there is a consensus. Then the ground is ready for negotiations with the government. Without that, I don't think it will be ready for negotiations, and I am very skeptical about what's happening in Doha, because the movements went there, and many of you have been there, but they are divided. And there are some people who were not even involved in the Darfur problems. They came in because they see at the end of the tunnel there are positions coming and they want a position. And they don't accept each other. So I came here invited by the institute because I was one of the people who was with them there. Suleiman was there, the professor was there, and others were there, and we were all convinced with what has been done, and we are all ready to try to convince those who are in a position to help us to have the next conference in which everybody will be there, in which we will discuss with the people who were not there what we agreed on, and we will reach a consensus. Then people are ready to meet and negotiate and solve their problem. And I think I will stop here. I don't think I covered everything, and I expect that everybody has something in mind, and I will be prepared to answer any question you have. Thank you.